Why is it that much of the world is so captivated by wine? Since the dawn of civilization, wine has been far more than just a drink. It's been part of our culture, our celebrations, and what some call the art of gracious living. Let's start off our first episode from the very beginning. Welcome to the VINVERITY Show. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for the very first episode of the VINVERITY Show. I'm your host, Corky, the certified wine expert, and I'll be your guide through the wonderful and fascinating world of wine. Here at VINVERITY, we are deeply rooted in honest and creative wine education. We're here to help you cut through the myths while never losing sight of the tradition and artisanal craft that wine was created to be. The show's going to be a mix of education with wine news and stories, but also interviews with winemakers and industry pros from across the globe. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell to keep up to date on all of our upcoming shows designed to keep you delightfully informed on all things wine. So, where do we begin? Well, what better place than at the very beginning of wine itself? At its core, wine is fermented fruit juice. Fermentation is a simple science where sugars consume yeast, creating alcohol and carbon dioxide. You can make wine from any fruit, but it's almost always made from grapes, specifically Vitis vinifera. More on that on a future episode. Archaeologists have found evidence of grape wine production going back about 8,000 years in modern-day Georgia. Archaeologists unearthed clay jars called qvevri with traces of wine residue dating to around 6,000 BCE. From there, winemaking spread to Egypt. Now, the Egyptians loved wine so much that they painted it on tomb walls and wrote about it in hieroglyphs. It's believed that back then, wine wasn't intended for everyone. It was reserved for pharaohs, priests, and the wealthy. Fast forward to the ancient Greeks, wine wasn't just a beverage. It was a part of philosophy, the arts, and everyday life. They believed that wine was a divine gift from the gods, famously Dionysus, the god of wine and theater. They hosted symposia, which were basically wine-fueled gatherings where people debated ideas, sang songs, and shared poetry. Wine was very much considered intellectual, spiritual, and creative. Then entered the Romans. They adored wine and spread it across their empire. Vineyards sprouted in France, Spain, Germany, and even Britain. The Romans were also early believers in terroir. This is the idea that wine reflects the place where it's grown. This is still one of the most highly discussed concepts in wine today, and a topic for another episode. Wine then became central to religion. With a deep symbolic and cultural history, this made it a natural choice for the Christian communion. As a result, monasteries across Europe became guardians of winemaking knowledge during the so-called Dark Ages. Benedictine and Cistercian monks were pivotal in winemaking development. They meticulously recorded, refined, and improved viticulture. In fact, many iconic regions like Burgundy and Champagne owe their early reputations to these very monks. Jump ahead to the Renaissance and the Age of Exploration. Europeans began to take vines wherever they traveled, including South Africa, South America, Australia, and North America. Then in the 19th century, America developed a fascination with Europe's wines. Some of these curious growers brought vines back across the Atlantic. But with them on their journeys over to Europe came an uninvited guest, the phylloxera louse. This tiny pest spread quickly through Europe's vineyards, nearly wiping them entirely out. It was finally discovered the cause just in time, and the solution was to then graft Europe's cherished Vitis vinifera vines onto the American rootstocks, which were resistant. This was a very close call and was one of the greatest crises in wine history. We'll be diving deeper into that story in a future episode. By the 20th century, wine had gone global. California, Chile, Australia, and South Africa joined France, Italy, and Spain on the world wine stage. With all of this growth has also come great change in the way wine is produced today. Over the past century, many innovations in both grape growing and winemaking have been introduced, transforming how wine is made. In some ways, it feels as though the pendulum has swung to the opposite extreme, leading many producers and drinkers to ask whether we've gone too far. Interestingly, some growers who once embraced every new technology are now returning to more traditional methods. Just a few examples of modern innovations include temperature controlled stainless steel fermentation, the widespread use of chemical sulfites for preservation, numerous additives and technical winemaking interventions, as well as clonal selection, which became the standard for vineyard propagation. This is a perfect example of where some of the world's finest estates, such as Chateau Lichebage of Bordeaux, are reverting back to the older practice of Massal selection. So today, winemaking spans a wide spectrum, from artisanal producers who honor tradition to the mass-produced factory-style wines that share little in common with those of the past. As you can see, the history of wine is deeply woven within the history of humanity itself. Wine is more than just a drink, it's a story thousands of years in the making. Each bottle could be looked at like a time capsule, capturing a place, a season, and the hands of the people who crafted it. And that concludes a very brief introduction to wine history. If you'd like to dive deeper into the world of wine, check out our courses at vinverity.com. Each course comes with lifetime access and downloadable resources to support your journey. Thank you so much again for joining me for the very first episode of the VINVERITY Show.